This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Concerns over Somali militant group's ability to move around millions of dollars through the formal banking system. An exclusive interview with the Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission on achievements realized over the decades. And a beauty pageant in Egypt spread some much-needed cheer among the young. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe, and joining me in studio with the business headlines is Uche.
Thank you, Peninah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Bits. The world records the least amount of carbon emissions ever in the first half of 2020. And Ethiopia calls off its plans to sell part of its national flag carrier. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to Peninah.
Thanks, Uche. A new UN report due to be published has offered a rare glimpse into the finances of Somali militant group Al-Shabab. The report shows nearly $2.8 million has moved through two accounts at Salam Somali Bank during a 10-week period this year. The militants are said to be moving millions through the formal banking system and investing in businesses and real estate. The report said the group has been raking in cash from road checkpoints and payments from fearful businesses. Their expenditure last year alone is estimated at around $21 million, with about a quarter going to its Aniyat intelligence arm. Somalia's Financial Reporting Center said it was investigating the situation. The bank in question has not responded to requests for comment. The Al-Qaeda-linked insurgents have been battling Somalia's government for years, carrying out frequent bombings and attacks. Al-Shabab have around 5,000 fighters and control towns and countryside in southern Somalia. Its spies and assassins operate nationwide. And for more on this, we are joined by Mwenda Mbijiwe. He is a security analyst based here in Nairobi. So the contents of that yet to be released UN report raises serious concerns about Al-Shabaab militants using formal banking systems. What are the major risks involved here?
Thank you very much. I must admit, like every other citizen of the world, I'm baffled that Al-Shabab has been pulling this through and succeeding at it. It's very disheartening, and I should say an insult to all the effort the world has put together to fight violence, extreme violence. And I must say the threat here for Al-Shabab to be able to, it can increase their capacity to fight the African mission troops in Somalia. I mean, there are no limits to what this money can do. And Peninah, I must admit that I'm truly baffled, and I can't wait for that report to come out so we examine it and begin to advise the region and the countries affected by this what to do and how to prepare.
So what should authorities in Somalia do to ensure Al-Shabaab is not able to finance its terror activities from investments in seemingly legitimate businesses? Unfortunately,
the government in Somalia has still not stood on its feet. They are working very hard at it. Their banking system is still, very weak. Their central bank and other financial institutions are still very vulnerable. They have not put in all the checks and balances and the controls that they need to ensure can help them detect money laundering, illicit money moving around. And so what I would say, the authorities there need to invest quickly in the controls of the financial sector, strengthen their treasury, strengthen their central bank, put in institutions that can check that these controls have been adhered to, and also make sure that money does not come from dirty hands and find its way through the banks. So they must be thorough as to when people come to bank cash money, how much they bank, where they got it from. But unfortunately, I can tell you Somalia is way far off. So maybe the world may want to be a bit strict with the central bank Somalia so that the central bank can up its game. Otherwise, if they just let things go the way they're going, they will never be able to control this. And Al-Shabab is extremely vicious.
So, Mwanda, this is a group that is earning or generating revenues from road checkpoints and fearful businesses. How can this group be financially crippled? How can their financial muscle be crippled? I mean, they're moving about millions of dollars, and you say that's enough to even topple governments. So how can that threat be crippled?
First of all, the African mission in Somalia must up its game and complete their mission. Unfortunately, some of the regions where they're able to mount up the roadblocks, do huge investments, invest in quarries and informal investment sectors where you think there's no money, like cotton growing or cotton in food. This is the region that Al-Shabab has been allowed to roam freely, and African mission did not complete its mission there. This is the larger part of what they call Sector 2, which is the sector from Kenya's Mandera corner going up along the Ethiopian border and deeper into the regions of Gedo, Baidoa. It's an extremely vast area, bigger than the countries of Rwanda and Burundi put together. And that region needs to be thoroughly manned and combed by African mission. If we must stop Al-Shabaab, we must make sure they are on the run. We cannot let them have peace of mind, because when they have peace of mind, that's when they start wiring money and exchanging wire transfers of funds across the world. We must destroy Al-Shabaab. There is no negotiation about it. If we put our hands in it, we must make sure it's done. And now that the region has embraced the regional counterterrorism agenda, then it's important that we coordinate this from all the countries in the region: Ethiopia, Kenya, other countries that would be in this, like Uganda. We need to put our hands together and truly and completely vanquish Al-Shabaab. If we do these extremists out of the way, then we cannot predict what they may want to do to survive, even if it's money laundering.
All right, thank you very much for that. Mwanda Mbijiwe, live for us here in Nairobi. Now, Al-Shabab militants have been carrying out deadly terror attacks in Somalia and neighboring countries. This Wednesday marks the third anniversary of the Mogadishu bombing that claimed the lives of 580 people. On 14 October 2017, a truck loaded with explosives blew up at the busy Zobe intersection in the Somali capital. The government blamed the Al-Shabab terror group, but the Al-Qaeda-linked group denied responsibility for the attack. The bombing is regarded as the biggest terror attack in the country. Memories of the attack are still fresh in the minds of many. Security analysts say many lessons were learned from that attack.
I was one of the victims of this attack. I sustained a minor injury. I got injured in the head. I was in the Zobe building and it collapsed.
The Zobe attack brought about a lot of changes. The government carried out a major security reform. It blocked many roads. Security agencies are now alerted. Other sectors, like the health sector, raised their level of preparedness. The number of hospitals increased.
To North Africa, where talks between Libya's rival administrations have ended without reaching tangible results. The talks in the Egyptian capital focused on a new constitution and on holding elections. Here's Adel Mahri with more.
After 3 days of talks, delegates from the Western Libyan High Council of State and Eastern-based parliament left Cairo without an agreement. They were discussing the creation of a constitution to guide a political roadmap. Offering a draft constitution in a public referendum would be a first step in Libya's transition.
With no breakthroughs in the constitutional talks, the Libyan crisis will elongate. There must be consensus among both the High Council of State and the Parliament. They must intensify talks between them until they reach a mechanism and common vision. Otherwise, the whole political process could freeze.
The Egyptian General Intelligence Bureau, the sponsor of the talks, has managed to get agreement from the Libyan rivals to hold another round of discussions. Primarily, the hanging issue is over which draft constitution to be put for a public vote. The Western Bloc has formed their own draft, while the Eastern Parliament wants to insert amendments to the nation's 69-year-old constitution.
The proper solution and the fastest way out is to amend the 1951-1963 constitution, and if there are valid articles from the draft constitution formed by the Council of State, they can be included. That will be a temporary 5-year constitution, and the elected bodies can recreate a permanent one after that period.
A new Libyan constitution is expected to lead to elections that will bring permanent legislative and executive authorities, which could put an end to the division in the country. The Libyan delegates have agreed to once again come back to the Egyptian capital to resume their constitutional talks. The schedule for the next round is yet to be announced. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Africa has had its fair share of political turmoil since 17 nations gained their independence in 1960, also known as the Year of Africa. The African Union believes independence has brought about economic growth and increased access to education and health services. To find out more about the continent's achievements, CGTN's Groom Chala spoke exclusively to Kwesi Kweti, the Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission.
60 years down the line, I believe Africa has come a long way. A lot of young Africans probably think that Africa should have moved further than that. But I believe that Africa has progressed. We have the era of liberation over. Now is the era of integration, economic progress. And this integration is underpinned by the recently signed agreement for the Continental Free Trade Area, and which headquarters we think poetically is Accra, Ghana.
A decade of military coups and conflicts is perhaps how Africa of the 1970s and part of the 1980s can be characterized. How did Africa get there? What role specifically did the OU play in helping the continent turn a new chapter?
Military coups and military interventions do not happen by chance. The military in the African situation is the most organized of all the associations. They have arms. So in situations where sometimes leaders are faced with difficulties, democratic deficits, economic challenges, it's very easy for military leaders who are ambitious to take over the authority of the states. Kwame Nkrumah himself suffered that, and a lot of African countries suffered that. But as time went on, we became clearer that that was not the solution, that democracy, transparency, integrity, and strong institutions were more likely to lead us forward. And so, as an organization, we slowly weaned us away from endorsement of military regimes, military coups. So now we have a situation where the African agreement for democracy kind of frowns on any military takeovers. And the African Union now, we have a situation where any military takeover follows immediately for suspension.
Well, on the other hand, as you remember, in around 2010, a narrative called Africa Rising started doing the rounds in Western media circles. Is Africa rising?
I think that narrative itself came from a headline on The Economist, Africa, the Hopeless Continent. And that was in tune with the tendency to denigrate Africa. And I think the notion of Africa rising again came from The Economist, having seen a mistake they made. Because we have the youngest population. Africa is endowed with human and material resources. And if we mobilize these resources with a fully educated population, Africa can overcome any hurdle. I think we're beginning to see that. We're beginning to see that. It may not be exactly flying the way we want it to be, but Africa certainly certainly it's not a hopeless continent that it was once touted to be.
You're watching Africa Live. Time for us to take a quick break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Shenzhen in southern China marks 40 years since it became a special economic zone. And we look at the social impact of COVID-19 in Africa and the continuing efforts to stop its spread on the continent.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Southern China's Shenzhen is marking 40 years since it became a special economic zone, which has led the country's opening up. A ceremony took place there this morning with the Chinese president laying out his vision for the city. Tangbo has more.
More than 800 participants gathered as Chinese President Xi Jinping called on the special economic zone to keep contributing to the nation's journey to become a strong socialist modern country.
Shenzhen will build the first demonstration zone of socialism with Chinese characteristics. As a model city of socialist modernization, it will comprehensively deepen reform and expand opening up, and it must promote the construction of the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area, enrich the implementation of one country, two systems, and take the lead in achieving socialist modernization.
Entrepreneurs and workers also spoke at the celebration. Both have made serious contributions to the enormous changes Shenzhen has witnessed over the past 4 decades. But the past 40 years could just be the beginning. China unveiled a detailed plan Sunday to deepen reforms and introduce new pilot schemes to Shenzhen. The plan's stated aim is to transform the city into a leading example of socialism with Chinese characteristics. The plan outlines wide-ranging reforms to be implemented in Shenzhen, including in the legal, financial, technological, institutional, and social sectors.
The construction of special economic zones in the new era should uphold socialism with Chinese characteristics. We will move forward towards a new development stage, implement the new concepts, promote high-quality development, and build a new pattern. We will advance reform and opening up from a higher starting point and begin a new chapter in building special economic zones.
Driven by the development of the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area, as well as the promise of these new pilot schemes, expectations are high here that Shenzhen will push forward and strengthen China's reform and opening up. Tangbo, CGTN, Shenzhen, Guangdong Province.
Much of Shenzhen's earliest reforms can be traced back to the efforts of the late Deng Xiaoping. President Xi paid tribute to him at Shenzhen's Li Tuanshan Park, where he laid flowers at his statue, expressing his deepest respect for the late Chinese leader. While Shenzhen is known for its technological and innovative spirit, the increase in cooperation between China and Africa has also seen a rise in economic and trade exchanges between Shenzhen and the continent. During the pandemic, Shenzhen has helped African countries fight COVID-19 with its scientific and technological expertise. On August 3rd, Shenzhen donated 460,000 medical masks to 12 African countries. Angola has entrusted the Shenzhen-based Genome Solutions company BGI Group with the construction of 5 coronavirus testing laboratories in the country. These so-called Fire Eye labs can process a total of 6,000 samples per day. Another Shenzhen enterprise, DJI, a world leader in aerial photography systems, has been using drones to help fight the pandemic in Tunisia, Morocco and South Africa. It has plans to work with other African countries. By the end of 2019, 520 African enterprises had invested in Shenzhen. From January to May 2020, Shenzhen's trade volume to Africa rose by 57% from a year ago to more than $2.6 billion. To Libya now, and the coronavirus pandemic is adding to the challenges school-going children are facing amid a conflict. The UN estimates that fighting has already seen 200 schools closed, affecting 200,000 pupils. CGTN's Joy Kiruki looks at the education obstacles in light of growing COVID-19 cases.
These young children have had their lives disrupted by war in Libya. And that is not all. The coronavirus is proving to be another obstacle to their education, with the caseload rising. Schools were left to develop education solutions for their students in the midst of the pandemic. For university professor Ahmed Falak, he has opted to homeschool his children.
The
decision by the Ministry of Education to automatically move students from 1st to 5th grade to the following year caused a crisis for a lot of people. For example, I can teach my children. I'm a university professor, and as you can see, I can teach my children and my brother's children who are in the 5th grade and below. But many people can't find someone to teach their children, which makes students fail.
Even though many children have not been able to continue learning, the government says a student will have to pass an exam before they can move to the next grade.
The ministry wants the students to submit their textbooks with the questions in them answered so that they can receive textbooks for the following year. But what will the students do if there is a new wave of coronavirus? They will miss 2 years of their education. This is a big problem for parents and the students. We will have a generation of students with weak education levels.
Students did not study anything. We did not teach anything for the students to understand. This is not a solution. The decisions by the Ministry of Education are random and are not studied well.
Libya currently has over 45,000 COVID-19 cases. And with war-related challenges facing the country, officials admit the numbers could be higher. The United Nations has described the situation as spiraling out of control. The fighting has already displaced more than 150,000 people, over half of whom are children, according to United Nations estimates. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Health authorities in South Africa say the number of active cases of COVID-19 is coming down, but South Africans are increasingly suffering from mental health issues as they try to negotiate the so-called new normal. Renee Delcam reports on the social impact of the pandemic.
Less than a year ago, no one had heard the term COVID-19 because it didn't exist. Now the lethal disease has turned our world upside down, inducing fear, anxiety, panic and depression in many.
With COVID, what we're seeing is that people get what we call a major depressive disorder. So people will feel very down for very long, or they'll feel very joyless for very long. And this goes on for a couple of weeks. And with that, they're not able to do their normal roles, whatever role they usually do.
Nearly 1,800 people in South Africa committed suicide under lockdown between March and July, says the country's health ministry.
COVID brought about depression. I became very withdrawn, even from my family within the household. I did have suicidal thoughts. There were days that I couldn't even get out of bed.
34-year-old Jodie Tucker says she struggled to cope with being separated from her young son during the lockdown.
Not being able to see him for months and try to explain to an autistic 7-year-old about COVID is extremely difficult. So luckily enough, you know, that I was fortunate enough that I could speak to him over the phone. But yet not being able to comfort him, not being able to be there.
Unlike Jody, many others suffer in silence. The South African Depression and Anxiety Group estimates that 1 in 3 people either suffers or will suffer from a mental illness. But only 1 in 10 has accessed mental health treatment or care.
So, you know, it's normal for us to feel sad. That's a normal part of human experience. But if we feel sad every day, most of the day, and we're not able to perform our usual functions, that's where we get worried about depression.
Psychiatric experts say South Africa's mental health services are geared towards treating severe mental health illnesses such as schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, and not common illnesses such as anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and post-traumatic stress disorders, conditions which are all expected to increase as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Renee Dalcom, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
In central Kenya, a wildlife conservation group is trying to dissuade herders from poisoning cattle carcasses to target predators like lions or hyenas. It's often vultures that end up being harmed. The poisoned carcasses also pose a threat to other scavengers, giving them diseases they could pass on to more animals or humans.
It's a scene for safari lovers in Kenya. A swarm of vultures scavenging a lion's carcass, playing their role in the ecosystem. But with escalating human and wildlife conflict, vulture populations are now in danger. These birds are the victims of poisoning of cattle carcasses by herders.
Well, the biggest threat to vultures is poisoning, and that is generally not targeted at the vultures. It's actually targeted at carnivores, mostly lions, hyenas, leopards as well, because the carnivores are actually occasionally killing livestock.
Poisoning is one of the leading causes of death for Kenyan vultures. 4 out of 8 species are critically endangered. Conservationists say the hooded vulture, for one, has seen its population plunge by nearly 90% over the past 45 years.
A vulture is a very long-lived bird. They can live over 20 years. So part of that adaptation means that they start to breed when they're much older, after 5 years old. So, and after they reach 5 years, they'll breed very slowly. So they'll have 1 egg, meaning 1 chick at most, every year or every other year. So when you get multiple poisoning incidences, as we have, where you're losing even just, 10, 20, 30 birds at an incident, you're talking many generations, many years before you're going to get those birds back.
A US-based conservation group is trying to tackle wildlife poisoning. Their efforts are focused around the conservancies of Kenya's Laikipia and Samburu regions. The Peregrine Fund works with pastoral communities whose livelihoods depend on their cattle.
Our part teaches on responding on these incidents, but we also have a solution. We offer a kind of simple solution to this, whereby very cheaply we also train communities to build predator-proof shelters for their livestock.
So far, more than 350 shelters have been built to protect livestock. And with heightened vigilance, conservationists hope to better their chances of saving the birds at risk. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
A reminder now of our top stories. A new UN report due to be published has offered a rare glimpse into the finances of Somali militant group Al-Shabab. The militants are said to be moving millions through the formal banking system and investing in businesses and real estate. The report also says the group has been raking in cash from road checkpoints and payments from fearful businesses. Talks between Libya's rival administrations have ended without reaching tangible results. The talks in the Egyptian capital focused on a new constitution and on holding elections. Offering a draft constitution in a public referendum would be a first step in Libya's transition. And Shenzhen in southern China is marking 40 years since it became a special economic zone, which has led the country's opening up. A ceremony took place there on Wednesday morning, with the Chinese president laying out his vision for the city. Well, it's time now to catch up with the day's business news, and for the very latest, we cross over to Uche.
Thanks, Peninah. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. The world records the least amount of carbon emissions ever in the first half of 2020. And Ethiopia calls off its plans to sell part of its national flag carrier.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time, it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours, no break.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, carbon dioxide emissions across the globe fell by 8.8% in the first 6 months of this year, marking the biggest drop for the first half-year period. This was mainly due to the effects of coronavirus-related restrictions, and that's according to research published in the journal Nature Communications. Now, the scientists from China, France, Japan, and the United States indicate that emissions fell by 1.55 billion tons compared to the same period last year. The drop is seen as larger than during any other economic downturn. The researchers used data based on real-time activity and analyzed the daily, weekly, and seasonal trends of carbon emissions before and after the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic downturn it triggered. Meanwhile, Ethiopia has suspended its plan to partially privatize its national carrier, Ethiopian Airlines. While making the announcement, the country's Ministry of Finance noted that the airline remains profitable without external funding. Here's CGTN's Gerum Chala taking up that story.
Under Ethiopia's economic reform plans, selling minority shares of the country's giant enterprise was being worked on. And Ethiopian Airlines, Africa's #1 airliner and one of the largest carriers in the world, was part of that plan. Now, Addis Ababa says that plan is no longer on the table. Ethiopia's Minister of Finance, Ahmed Shide, said the government has revoked the process of partial privatization of Ethiopian Airlines. He said the revoking of the plan of the partial privatization of the airlines is attributed to its growing global reputation and profitability. Ethiopia's government earlier plan of selling minority shares of these giant airlines was motivated by the idea of making it even bigger and much more competitive compared to other international airlines. That was hoped to be achieved through increased foreign investment too. Sources, however, say ET has surpassed all expectations and has proven that it can continue being profitable without extra cash injection. The airline has defied the difficult COVID-19 times to remain successful. Grumpchara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
And heading to Tanzania now, the country's central bank expects its economy to grow by 5.5% this year. Now, key indicators remain positive despite the COVID-19 pandemic's adverse effects on the global economy. Here's CGTN's Daniel Kijo with more.
It's a positive report from the Bank of Tanzania, with positive helpful results from all major economic indicators. The bank's Monetary Policy Committee is advising the central bank to continue implementing policies that promote low inflation. The committee says this will help the economy to continue to grow. The bank's governor says the MPC is satisfied with the government's fiscal policy, with its focus on developing infrastructure and bringing more revenue. The committee expects more growth due to factors like good policies, a good domestic food supply, a stable exchange rate, moderate oil prices, and a significant amount of foreign exchange earnings. The inflation rate has also remained low, averaging about 3.3% in July-August of 2020 and expected to fluctuate between 3 to 5% in the coming year. Tanzania has also benefited from the increase in the price of gold during the COVID-19 period. The mining sector filled the gap felt by the tourism industry. Now, experts advise that the government should focus on improving the performance of the private sector to continue growing. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
And in Tunisia, the production of dates is expected to reach nearly 335,000 tons during the 2020-2021 season. Now, Tunisia is the world's biggest exporter of dates by value. Last year alone, the agricultural subsector contributed over $260 million to the North African nation's economy. Here's CGTN's Anin Shaushi reporting from Tunis.
Lotfi Al-Arabi is a date farmer in the regions of Merith and Zarat in southern Tunisia. During the harvest season, he spends over 12 hours a day in his oasis, where he owns hundreds of date palms.
Date palms need care throughout the year in order to guarantee a good harvest. The season has just kicked off. I am very optimistic about the outcome, but I hope that the price of the harvest set by the state will cover my expenses. This sector is facing many challenges, especially the lack of agricultural labor. Harvesting dates requires one to be in a good physical condition.
According to the National Institute of Statistics, this agricultural subsector provides over 30,000 direct and indirect jobs in Tunisia, but the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic has caused date exports to plummet. The general lockdown imposed in March 2020 to curb the spread of the virus blocked the export system. Consequently, 250 packaging, conditioning and export companies were shut down.
Many date farmers have abandoned their oasis because the cost of harvesting is too high, while they could not export to foreign markets due to the pandemic. If the second wave hits the country and paralyzes the distribution and export chains, tens of thousands of people will lose their jobs.
The Director General of the Interprofessional Group of Dates at Tunisia's Ministry of Agriculture announced that the new season of production and marketing of these fruits will experience cyclical difficulties characterized by a second wave of coronavirus that will impact the pace of export.
All the stakeholders know that the new season will be accompanied by difficulties, especially in terms of marketing and lower prices. We are implementing a strategy to boost the domestic market and encourage local consumption of this product that's marketed to 83 countries around the world.
With regard to exports for the 2020-2021 season, Tunisian authorities decided to grant date exporters an exceptional export premium of 50% of the cost of land transport and to increase the premium for the sea transport to the Libyan market and sub-Saharan African markets from 30% to 70%. The North African state also aims to diversify its export markets through better opening to the Asian markets. According to data from the World Food and Agriculture Organization FAO, Tunisia ranks 10th worldwide in terms of production of dates, 4th in the world in terms of quantities exported, and 1st worldwide in terms of export value. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And on the international front, Apple has unveiled its latest iPhones. There has been the usual chorus of criticism about what the devices offer and what they don't. But what's new is that for the first time, the tech giant got into the game.
Introduced specifically on 5G was the fact that all 4 of them, in the U.S. at least, are going to support all types of 5G
system, providing the fastest speeds in the country.
Verizon, yes, has millimeter wave, but so, by the way, do AT&T and T-Mobile. They just don't have it in as many places. But even though Verizon has it, it's still extraordinarily limited. You know, they talked about adding new cities, but really, it's only a few blocks in certain.
$600 respectively, while the Pro and Pro Max begin at $1,000 and $1,100. They make some major advancements in photography and videography. That includes incorporating something Apple calls Deep Fusion, which uses machine learning for pixel-by-pixel processing of photos.
They enable powerful computational photography for camera experiences that simply are not possible with traditional cameras. With Deep Fusion, you can even see the detail of her dress in this low light setting. In this classic black and white, you can feel the sun glistening on the horse.
The fact that the iPhone 12 Pro and Pro Max can record 10-bit Dolby Vision HDR video, I know it's quite a mouthful, is really impressive because you haven't been able to get that except on extraordinarily high-end devices.
Apple revived a technology used with its Mac laptops, MagSafe, which allows devices like ranging scanner or LiDAR. It's a technology commonly used in self-driving cars. Now allows iPhone users to precisely place objects in augmented reality worlds and map and transform 3D environments. Mark News, CGTN, Sunnyvale, California.
Well, that's all for now in Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on...
Good looks can be deceiving.
An Egyptian cosmetics company has launched the country's first beauty pageant for children. The competition aims to find the most adorable boy and girl in the country. With the COVID-19 pandemic interrupting the process, it turned into an online competition. Let's take a look.
Looking for the perfect children to become the face of their products, an Egyptian company decided to launch the nation's first kids beauty pageant. The philosophy, however, was to avoid commercialized concepts of beauty and look for a popular Egyptian view. So instead of bringing professionals to select, the company left people to vote.
There is little effort towards the kids. We wanted to elevate the parents' interest in taking care of their children's beauty. That builds a child's self-esteem and can avoid many character issues when they grow up. Investing more into our kids is what inspired us to create this event.
800 contestants joined the 8 stages online competition. They had to post photos and videos until they've reached the final selection. The winners should have been announced in March, but the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown has forced the pageant to stretch to October.
We came across the competition by chance. We learned about it through Facebook. It's a lot of work for a kids' competition. There were so many stages. We kept getting votes until the final stage, which was on YouTube. It was a great effort.
Since her birth, we've established an Instagram and Facebook profiles for Tarlene. She already had followers. I always wanted her to become a model in the fashion industry.
Do you want to know which cartoon character I like? I like Elsa, she says. Gaining more time under the pandemic, the competition matured. Instead of 2 winners, they became 8, giving space for differently able children to stand proud as winners. This cute competition will give a chance for these kids to become young models speaking to all segments of society. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
So the story of one Egyptian who seems content with living in bygone eras. Hassan Al-Tuki has taken to collecting and using vintage telephones. CGTN's Joy Kiruki with that story.
This might not be a familiar sight to many young people. Hassan Al-Turki is intentional about his communication gadgets. He uses an 1898 wooden box telephone. He is among the few people who do not own a mobile phone. He believes old is gold. and is a vintage phone collector. The 65-year-old operates a phone repair shop, a business he inherited from his father.
I
love it because it's what we are good at. I could have been impacted by the mobile phone market, and if I didn't have any vision, I would have rented this shop for 20,000 Egyptian pounds per month. But this is my job. If it makes me 5,000 Egyptian pounds per month, I'll be satisfied. But it's not my area of expertise, and it's not about the money. I cannot abandon the thing that I grew up being attached to and loved.
Al-Turki's collection consists of pieces he bought from auctions. He collected other pieces after they were discarded in old palaces and villas. He repairs and restores them to working condition.
This is King Farouk's telephone dating back to 1933. It is specifically used in the Royal Court. This is the phone that was gifted by the Siemens company to Thomson Hudson, the inventor and engineer. This is Charlie Chaplin's telephone. It is hung on the wall, and this one is to be placed on a desk. They are a pair.
Al-Turki has also introduced his sons to the business. They often help at the shop.
We are proud of my father's profession since he inherited it from his father. It's something that we're proud of and something that belongs to us. This has always been my dad's theory, and this is what he taught us. As you can see, the telephones here are all very old and ancient. This is history. We are proud of it until now.
It's a family business Al-Turki is determined to preserve and pass on to the next generation. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Ahead in sports. The city of Bergamo sees hosting Italy versus Netherlands match as symbolic of rebirth after